Seen as one of the largest and most influential religions in the world, Christianity dates back as far as 2,000 years ago and derives the majority of its legends and myths from the Judaism religion. These writings, as referenced in the Bible, a collection of ancient scriptures, have often been regarded as incomplete translations or scriptures missing a large amount of information. It's believed it was discarded eons beforehand in an effort to filter out what the Catholic Church and the ancient kings thought time was for humanity to remember. These true scriptures and details were thought by scholars to have been completely destroyed and lost to time, unable to be recovered for the foreseeable future. However, this turned out not to be the case after the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These ancient scrolls contained first-person accounts of ancient stories regarded in the Bible from that of the Book of Enoch to the complete story of Noah, as well as a tremendous amount of information regarding the nature of angels and fallen angels. What was so strange about these stories was not their complete and unedited nature, but rather the detail inside these legitimate documents and the stories they told. Many accounts in the Book of Enoch regarded the angels similar to that in design of aliens, with Enos even recounting entering a floating cloud, in which they resided via a beam of once inside this cloud, that was described by Enoch as using smokeless fires, bright lights, and lightning. He wrote that he was brought out into the stars and observed strange phenomena that many experts believe are referring to known anomalies in our galaxy, such as supermassive black holes, our sun itself, and many other cosmological constants recorded in first-hand accounts. Not only this, but after Enoch journeyed with these angels through the stars for a couple of weeks, upon coming back to Earth, he realized that more than 300 years had passed. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were originally found scattered throughout 12 different caves in the region, many believed it to be the complete collection of the sent, and no evidence of other caves or artifacts could be discovered. Recently, however, back in late 2017, a new Dead Sea Scroll cave was located, making it the 13th cave to house these strange artifacts. Considering these scrolls hold unedited original versions of biblical history, as well as additional stories removed from worship scriptures, they could more than hold the secret as to many religious traditions, histories, and evidence of ancient biblical knowledge. However, the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. recently came forward with a startling discovery. They said the following: the Museum of the Bible is trying to be as transparent as possible. We're victims. We're victims of misrepresentation. We're victims of fraud. After an exhaustive review of all imaging and scientific analysis results, it's evident that none of the textual fragments in the Museum of the Bible's Dead Sea Scroll collection are authentic. Moreover, each exhibit is characteristic that suggests they are deliberate forgeries. So it turns out these scrolls are fake. It's made people question what other ancient texts and documents could be out there that are potentially fake. As technology increases, it will help researchers to piece together which are fake and which are genuine. So my question to you guys is, what do you make of this recent discovery? The Central Intelligence Agency has just announced that everyone should stay at home, and while we're doing so, we could look into UFOs. They went on to say the following: back in 1978, the CIA declassified hundreds of documents detailing the agency's investigations into unidentified flying objects. This was during the late 1940s into the 1950s. Decided to highlight a few documents within the vast amount of data contained within our Freedom of Act Information UFO collection that both skeptics and believers will find interesting. The truth is out there, and it's your time to find out. One of these documents detailed the following. Going back in July 1952 in Berlin, furnished with the sworn testimony of an eyewitness, Oskar Link, a 46-year-old German and former mayor of Gliederhausen, West Berlin intelligence offices, begun investigating a most unusual flying saucer story. According to this story, an object resembling a huge flying pan and having a diameter of around 15 meters landed in a forest clearing in the Soviet zone of Germany. He said the following: while we were walking around Hasselbeck, my daughter pointed out something which lay at a distance of around 140 meters away. Since it was twilight, I thought that she was pointing at a young deer. I left my motorcycle near a tree and walked towards the spot which she pointed to. When, however, I reached the spot around 55 meters from the object, I realized that my first impression had been wrong. What I had seen were two men who were now about 40 meters away from me. They seemed to be dressed in some shiny metallic clothing. They were stooped over and were looking at something lying on the ground. I approached until I was around 10 meters from them. I looked over a small fence and then noticed a large object whose diameter I estimated to be between 13 and 15 meters. It looked like a huge frying pan. There were 2 rows of holes in this periphery, around 30 centimeters in circumference. The space between the 2 rows was around 0.45 meters. On top of this metal object was a black conical tower around 3 meters high. At that moment, my daughter, who had remained a short distance behind me, called me. The 2 men must have heard my daughter's voice because they immediately jumped on the conical tower and disappeared inside. I'd previously noted that one of the men had a lamp on the front part of his body, which lit up at regular intervals. Now the side of the object on which the holes had been opened began to glitter. Its color seemed green but later turned red. At the same time, I began to hear a slight hum. While the brightness and hum increased, the conical tower began to slide down into the center of the object. The whole object then began to rise slowly from the ground and rotate like a tomb. It seemed to me as if it was being supported by the cylindrical plant, which had gone down from the top of the object through the center, and had now appeared from its bottom on the ground. The object, surrounded by a ring of flame, was now a certain number of feet above the ground. I then noted that the whole object had risen slowly from the ground. The cylinder on which it was supported had now disappeared within its center, and had reappeared on top of the object. The rate of climb had now become greater. At the same time, my daughter and I heard a whistling sound similar to heard when a bomb falls. The object rose to a horizontal position, turned towards a neighboring town, and then gained altitude. It disappeared over the heights of the forest in the direction of Stockhound. So what do you make of this interesting tweet by the CIA? Astronomers have announced that a massive comet 5 times the size of Jupiter is currently visible from Earth. The giant celestial body is known as C2019 Y4 Atlas. It was picked up by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. This is a robotic system that tells astronomers about near-Earth objects before they collide with our planet. Over the years, it's detected many objects since first being implemented. And this project has even received NASA funding, which helped it to add 2 additional telescopes in the southern hemisphere. Once these 2 telescopes are installed, it will help the scientists to scan the skies to get quicker updates about near-Earth objects. This particular object caught the attention of astronomers because of its size. While the size of the comet is believed to be a few miles in diameter, it's the objects the comet is the nebulous envelope around the nucleus of a comet. Being this size, it will be easy for people to see this. At this moment in time, it's close to Mars' orbit, but people have been taking photographs of the massive body, which does show up well due to how bright it is. Once it starts to make its way towards the inner solar system, it will become one of the brightest objects in the sky, with astronomers saying that you'll be able to see it easily with the naked eye. It's expected to get close to Earth around mid-April. It's also been noted that because light pollution is currently down, it will make for a better viewing experience. The comet was first discovered back in December of last year, and since then it's grown massively in diameter. In fact, it's expected to be over 447,387 miles wide. This is when taking into consideration is coma. At this moment in time, it poses no threat to Earth. Although every year we see a variety of near-Earth objects come close to our planet, this is one that we're definitely safe from. Astronomers have said at its closest point, it will be around 70 to 74 million miles away from Earth. Even at this distance, though, it will still be very bright. Researchers who observed the celestial body noticed that its biggest increase in brightness happened around March. This is when it went from magnitude 17 to magnitude 8. This showed the team that a 4,000-fold increase in brightness had occurred. As mentioned, SEA 2019 Y4 Atlas was first picked up on by the Astroterrestrial Impact's Last Alert System. This can be found in Hawaii, and this piece of equipment has been at the center of a number of incredible discoveries. Incredibly, when C. 2019 Y4 Atlas was first discovered back in December of 2019, it was really faint and researchers could only see it using one of their telescopes. However, due to the massive increase in brightness, it can be seen with the naked eye. Researchers have said that one of the best ways to see it is with a telescope or binoculars. However, these won't have to be necessarily powerful due to how bright the object is. So what do you make of this giant celestial body, and will you be looking out for it during this month? The United States President Donald Trump has just signed 2 bills into law. This happened earlier this month, and it has to do with 5G. One of the questions that many people have, though, is why this 5G bill passed through during this time. With some asking, could it not have waited? Recently, it's been announced that various companies plan to implement 5G towers. At face value, this appears to be a great idea. The companies are promising us that we'll be receiving much faster download speeds, with some studies saying that wireless networks will be around 10 to 20 times faster than they currently are. However, there have been some concerns that these 5G towers will actually be causing more harm than good. It's been reported by some websites that these towers are actually harming wildlife. Going back in 2018, hundreds of birds were discovered in a park in the Netherlands. Reports said that these birds mysteriously dropped to the ground whilst they were flying. Some of the first reports came in from residents who said they'd witnessed the birds falling from the sky. Although these reports can't be confirmed, alleged eyewitnesses described the birds becoming motionless while being around 50 feet in the air. One person said it was as if the birds flew through an area that had poison in it, as several of them dropped at once. Interestingly, it was reported that this event happened during a 5G tower installation. Shortly after the tower was erected, people nearby reported that all walks of wildlife started to act strange. This ranged from small species such as that of insects to ducks and humans. Locals who fed the ducks reported that none of them wanted to eat the food they had brought, saying that they had never seen this type of behavior before. They went on to say the ducks would even start to swim in a strange manner, such as flapping their wings for several minutes and dunking their heads under the water for a prolonged period of time. These events and the constant posts on social media have caused people to speculate whether the 2 events were linked. After all, the locals reported that none of these strange behaviors were happening before the 5G tower was put into place. The White House recently came forward and said that President Trump signed the Secure and Trusted Communications Network Act. They said this was his commitment to defend networks from entities posing an unacceptable risk to national security. They went on to say the following: "This legislation will help protect our communications infrastructure by prohibiting the use of federal funds to purchase equipment from companies that pose a national security threat. The Act creates a reimbursement program to remove and replace equipment in use that was manufactured by entities posing unacceptable national security risk." Provisions of this legislation also help ensure the federal government can share critical information about supply chain security with carriers. These reforms will help protect our nation's vital communication networks and also ensure the United States reaches its 5G potential. The security and prosperity of the United States depends on high-speed, reliable, and secure communications networks. The next generation of wireless technology, or 5G, is expected to have vast implications for the future of the United States. 5G has the potential to transform numerous parts of American society, ranging from artificial intelligence to manufacturing to public services. Using untrustworthy vendors to build communication infrastructure threatens our security by exposing our networks to actors who are potentially influenced by foreign entities. Many have pointed out, though, it seems like a bizarre time to pass this bill. This bill was passed on the 12th of March 2020. NASA is at the forefront of space exploration. Yearly, they make hundreds of discoveries, each one helping us learn more about the universe that we live in. However, every so often, a mysterious anomaly will be discovered. This is what happened recently, and it caused various theories and questions to be put forward. One of the most recent ones came from a solar terrestrial relations observatory camera. It was picked up by amateur astronomers, and they described it as a UFO. Some even went as far as suggesting that this anomaly was an Ezekiel will. These come from the book of Ezekiel. Over the years, many have come forward and said that Ezekiel's vision could have been proof of UFOs in the Bible, further saying that these mysterious crafts have been witnessed on our planet for thousands of years. They point to various illustrations that have been made that also feature these unidentified flying objects. Some have appeared in ancient paintings, while others have been found in ancient caves. These are usually explained by researchers as being pareidolia, and that what we're seeing is something that isn't a UFO. However, some don't agree with this explanation and suggest that there's something else at play. Those that have seen the NASA images do agree that it shows what appears to be a massive wheel-like object. Interestingly, it could also be seen rotating and ejecting some kind of matter. Many UFO researchers were excited by the images, as they said that it was solid proof that something massive was lurking in our solar system. Some then said that NASA will most likely ignore these claims and try to brush them under the carpet. However, NASA did in fact respond, and they said the following. Some people have noticed an odd shape, sort of a cross inside a circle entering the field of view of one of the HI-2 telescopes on stereo. This was around the 20th of February 2020. Eventually, there is a cone shape that appears next to it. You can see the feature in question in this movie moving from right to left, just below on the right side of the image. The answer lies in the exact opposite side of the image. At the same time as this strange-looking feature starts to be visible, the very bright planet Venus enters the field of view from the left. Notice that Venus and the feature stay in step almost exactly opposite each other across the middle of the detector. This is not a coincidence. The strange-looking geometrical object is actually an internal reflection of the planet Venus within the telescope's optics. This effect has been seen many times before. We've also received some questions about whether images from the most recent few days are of lower quality and are sometimes incomplete. This is because our data comes in two streams that are highly compressed and lower quality, but far-spaced weathered beacon data, which are replaced after a few days with better science quality images. Some have pointed out how it's interesting that NASA came forward and answered these questions. Usually when these strange-looking objects appear in streams and videos, they don't get answered. But for some reason, they felt the need to come forward and give an answer for this one. So what do you make of this mysterious object that was recently observed? And do you agree with NASA's explanation? From being amongst the first to discover the New World, to the invention of boats that rivaled the construction methods of the greatest naval fleets ever built, there appears to be a number of Vikings whose stories have reached the modern day. So today we take a look at these three notorious Vikings. Harstein of Nal was a Viking chieftain of the late 9th century, known for his attacking voyages in France, Spain, Italy, the Byzantine Empire, and England. A powerful warrior, his name was one that sparked fear to others. As son of Ragnar Lothbrok, Harstein was born into a family of ruthless raiders. In 1859, alongside his brother Bjorn, Harstein led a fleet of 62 ships to raid the Mediterranean. The expedition did not get off to a good start. Harstein was defeated by the Kingdom of Asturias in Spain, and later the Muslims of the Umayyad Caliphate. Thankfully for Harstein, the situation soon improved with the successful sacking of Algeciras and Mazima on the north coast of Africa, followed by further raids into the Balearic Islands. It was on their journey home that Harstein first heard about the famous city of Rome. Hearing about the large amount of treasures that were held there, he decided to change course towards Italy. However, believing they were headed for Rome, Hastin and Bjorn's army actually ended up in the city of Luna. Luna had once been a leading exporter of white Carrara marble, but had now devolved into ruins. Still under the impression Luna was actually Rome, Hastin and Bjorn hatched a plan. First, Hastin sent his emissaries to request food and shelter from the people of Luna and tell them their chieftain was unwell. When their requests were denied by the people of Luna, who were wary of foreign attacks, Hastin's emissaries were sent again into the city. This time, however, they reported that Hastin had died, but on his deathbed had converted to Christianity. The emissaries requested a Christian burial for Hastin, and the gates of Luna were finally opened. However, when Harstein was led into the city in a coffin, he was actually very much alive and fully armed. In the middle of his funeral, he jumped up from the coffin and murdered Luna's bishop and proceeded to sack the city. It was said that when Harstein finally realized the city was Luna and not the famous Rome, he was so embarrassed that he massacred every man in sight. Harstein and Bjorn sacked and ravaged Pisa and Fisol and raided the Byzantine Empire's territories in the eastern Mediterranean. However, luck ran out when their ships were attacked by a Moorish fleet in the Strait of Gibraltar. With only 20 ships remaining, Harstein and Bjorn rose to the challenge, and with a severely reduced army still managed to capture the king of Pamplona and ransom him back to his people for 70,000 dinars. Returning home to Loire, Harstein and Bjorn had lost 2/3 of their men, but in the process had become extremely rich. Settled back in France, it didn't take Harstein long to grow restless. He soon allied himself with Solomon, the king of Brittany, and fought against the Franks in 866. He went on to ravage Bourges, Orleans and Angers before finally being expelled from Loire County by Charles the Bald. Harstein soon looked towards England for riches and plunder. At the grand age of 71 years old, Harstein was still powerful enough to cross into England with an army of 80 ships and occupy the village of Milton in Kent, while his allies landed at Appledore with 250 ships. Alfred the Great feared the Vikings so much he positioned his army between the two to stop them from uniting. In response, Harstein and his forces retreated to Essex, which they used as a base to raid Mercia. However, when the bulk of his men were out raiding, his fort was captured along with the ships, cargo, women and children, which included Harstein's wife and children, by the army of eastern Essex. Soon after, Harstein launched another attack along the Thames Valley, but was pursued by a Mercian and West Saxon army, and eventually was trapped at Buttingdon. This resulted in the Battle of Buttingdon in 893, where Harstein's men were victorious. But once more, when moving to Chester, Harstein's men were attacked by the Mercians, who attempted to starve them by removing any livestock and destroying all the crops in the area. By leading a revenge raid along the Thames Valley and the River Severn to a new fort on the River Lee. The raid was cut short when Alfred caught up with the army and obstructed the River Lee on either side. Finally, Harstein's forces gave in and abandoned their camp and sent their women back home, where they soon followed. At this point, Harstein disappears from the history books. A lifetime of ravaging and raiding dozens of cities across many kingdoms in Europe and North Africa, Harstein had earned himself the title as the lusty and terrifying old warrior of the lore and the song. Broder of Man is best known for his military efforts in the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. Broder was described as tall and strong, with long black hair and clad in a coat of mail which no steel could bite. Between himself and his brother Osbec of Man, the two had over 30 ships to their name, and were described as men of such hardihood that nothing can withstand them. While his brother was famed for his wisdom, Broder was known for his skills in sorcery. At the time, Brian Boru was a powerful king in Ireland. However, at 88 years old, he was no longer in a physical state to fight. What's more, his many victories against the Vikings in Dalkey, Secoy and Bilalecta left his relationship with the other Viking leaders in a perilous position. One of his Viking foes was Sigtryg, Silkenbeard, king of Dublin and son of Burrow's ex-wife Cormlad. Sigtryg was allowed to remain as king of Dublin as long as he pledged loyalty and paid tribute to Burrow, but soon he plotted with Earl Sigurd of Orkney and Brodier to defeat him. Notably, to Burrow's credit, Brodier's brother Osbec refused to fight against so good a king, so the two brothers found themselves on opposing sides. The Battle of Clontarf took place on Good Friday and was the greatest battle to take place in Ireland. It was said that Broder knew he and his army were doomed from the beginning. According to Niall's saga, when sailing for the battle, a loud and unpleasant noise passed over Broder and his men, which immediately awoke them. Emerging from their beds, they were horrified to see the noise was accompanied by a shower of boiling blood. The next night, they woke to an assault on their ships led by a ghost army equipped with flying swords, axes and spears. These 2 nights of horrors resulted in at least one death on every ship. Broder asked for guidance on what these events indicated and was told they showed that he and his men would be dragged down to the pains of hell. Just as the premonitions told, in a desperate tactical bid, Broder abandoned his army and snuck up behind Boru's brother, Wulf the Quarrelsome. However, Wulf easily overpowered Broder and sent him running and hiding in the woods. Knowing that the battle was lost, Broder charged at Boru's camp, where the king had been advised to await the outcome of the battle. There are many tales of heroic deeds during the Battle of Clontarf, such as Boru's son, who was said to have killed 50 men with the sword in his right hand and 50 men with the sword in his left. However, Broder rushing in and killing the elderly Boru while the king was mid-prayer was not one of them. Almost immediately Broder was seized by Boru's stepson Ulfrida, who slit his belly and nailed his gut to a tree and forced Broder to walk round it until he disemboweled himself. Following the Battle of Clontarf, Sigtryg was the only leader of the rebelling army to survive. While he remained as King of Dublin, the Viking power in Ireland was broken forever. The main focus of all shifted to integrating the Celtic chieftains and the Vikings to live peacefully and harmoniously. Despite his death, it was Burrow who was remembered for his victory and acclaimed as Ireland's national hero, Thorstein the Red. Thorstein the Red, otherwise known as Thorstein Olafsson, was a Viking who flourished in the late 9th century in Scotland. Born around 850 AD, Thorstein was the son of Olaf the White and Oed the Deep-Minded. He married Thorid, the daughter of Evain the Easterner. Thorstein and Thorid had a son, Olaf Phelon, and a number of daughters. With a happy life at home established, Thorstein allied with Jarl of Orkney, Sigurd Eysteinsson. Together they waged a series of campaigns across Scotland in which Thorstein established himself as King of Caithness, Sutherland, Ross, and Moray. In fact, Thorstein and Eysteinsson were so triumphant they eventually received tribute from half of Scotland. The biggest mistake Thorstein made was making peace with the Scottish. Unbeknownst to him, Scottish chieftains started plotting Thorstein's downfall and killed him in a battle at Caithness. The exact details of his death are unrecorded, but Thorstein can be remembered for his military prowess while on the attack. But what do you make of these three fearsome Viking warriors? As researchers make attempts to pierce the veil on the shrouded mystery of our collected past, they found startlingly strange artifacts and ancient stones. Some of these tell peculiar stories and force experts to question previously held assumptions. Some odd discoveries have been found all around the world and point to impossible-to-explain moments in history that are left relatively unanswered even to this day. So today, here are unexplained mysteries. We'll be going over three mysterious ancient stone artifacts that have been discovered worldwide. The Cocknose Stone. The stone, which is found in Scotland's western Bartonshire, is by far among the most interesting and beautiful Bronze-aged cup and ring carvings in Europe. It's known for its grooved spirals, geometric shapes, carved indentations, and many types of mysterious patterns. It measures approximately 42 feet long and 26 feet wide, featuring about 90 grooved spirals and carved indentations together with a ringed cross and a pair of four-toed feet. The Cocknose Stone was discovered by Reverend James Harvey in 1887. Interestingly, though, back in 1964, various archaeologists from Glasgow University said that artifacts should be buried in the ground. This was to protect it from thieves and vandals. It's been buried under the earth for 51 years, with housing developments also posing a threat to the safety of the stone. In 2015, September, the stone was excavated and exposed for 36 hours. This was for researchers and archaeologists to study, collect information, and take images to create replicas, after which it was again buried. The marks of cup and ring are a form of prehistoric art that consists of a concave depression which is less than a few centimeters across. It's carved on the surface of the rock and is mostly surrounded by circles that are also etched onto the stone. The decorations occur as petroglyphs on natural borders and outcrops and on megaliths like stone circles and passage graves. They're mostly found in northern England, northwest Italy, Scotland, northwest Spain, Switzerland, Ireland, Portugal, and central Greece. Similar forms have also been found in other parts of the world, including India, Brazil, and Mexico. Despite the fact the original meaning that was contained in the Cocknose Stone is now lost, people have put forward theories suggesting its possible purpose. Some suggest that the ancient writing links back to a spiritual meaning, have said that it could have no link to star maps and celestial objects. It's no secret that our ancient ancestors were fascinated with the cosmos. Over the years, various artifacts and writings have been found, and these have shown modern researchers that our ancestors tried to understand the solar system and everything inside it. According to some, it's a map showing other settlements in the valley. Others say it was maybe used in sacrificial ceremonies, where water or milk was poured into the grooves. Or, as mentioned, it is an astronomical map which indicated constellations as a guide to prehistoric farmers for when they needed to complete their harvests. Many of the carvings are situated near or incorporated into burial mounds, thus linking the symbols somehow to burial beliefs and practices concerning the ancestors and an afterlife, have said they've found similar-looking designs. This is in places where people have been buried. Various researchers can't seem to agree on what the stone depicts. As of today, it's anyone's guess as to what the designs mean. The Inga stone rising amidst the water of the Inga River in Brazil. The stone is a treasure in archaeology that has remained controversial to date. The Inga stone is 45 meters long and 4 meters high. It has mysterious geometrics scattered across it, all of which are different sizes. Despite the fact that researchers have speculated the origin and implication of the symbols, it's not yet been possible to demonstrate with surety that the theories are factual. Considering that the rock's origin is over 6,000 years old, the Inga stone is a global archaeological wonder. There are other stones, in addition to caves in the Inga stone's surrounding, that have engraved surfaces, but not of the same level of complexity and style and elaboration as the Inga stone. An archaeologist and researcher encountered one of the caves where this artifact was discovered, and after looking around, several more were discovered. One researcher has examined a total of 497 symbols on the cave walls. Most of the engravings in Inga have a dark significance, even though some undoubtedly represent celestial elements, two of which have been observed to be practically identical to Orion's Milky Way constellation. Weapons and primitive indexes. These stories are segmented with each of the symbols and they connect to the chapter they correspond to. Professor Rolam, who is also a specialist in Latin, Greek, and theology, has stated that the symbols of the Inga stone have a similar design to other engravings. This includes those of Phoenician engravings. Other researchers have found that the Inga stone have made observations of the possible relationship of the symbols with the ancient runes, and have made further confirmations that they're similar in complexity and linear arrangement with a possible passage of religious scriptures. According to experts, the circles appearing engraved on the Inga stone could have a relationship with phallic symbols. The spiral shapes could mean transcosmologic trips or displacements, possibly as a result of shamanic trances. In this sense, the series of symbols can thus point to an ancient formula engraved on the Inga stone, possibly used for accessing a door to the supernatural world. According to other researchers, there's a chance that the ancient prints were a warning to the future about the proximity of a global disaster. It was said that people of the time would have preserved their technology from a previous civilization. The idea that there's multiple languages etched on the artifact has caused researchers to put forward different theories. There has been no historical evidence up to today that links stars and constellations with the Brazilian natives of this era. There's a possibility that the engraving artists were part of a nomadic civilization that visited the region temporarily. Regardless of which theory is correct, one thing that is certain is that these carvings were significant. Hopefully, as our knowledge and technology advances, we'll be able to discover more about this ancient artifact. The Petone Skystone, our planet, over billions of years, has attracted several meteorites crashing onto its surface. The Petone Skystone is one such meteorite. The stone was discovered in Sierra Leone in 1990 by Angelo Petone. Angelo was a geologist and archaeologist. The Skystone is known for its bluish hue and being made up of mostly oxygen. Local legends have said that the stones were actually creatures that lived in the sky and were thrown down on Earth to remain buried beneath the soil, since God was disturbed by their wrongdoings. After discovering it, Pet1 sent the stones for analysis in laboratories in Tokyo, Rome, and Germany. The tests returned and showed that the stone's composition was 77% oxygen and 20% carbon and lime, and other materials. Researchers made conclusions that the stone was different from Earth's stone, and suggested that it likely came from outside of the planet. The carbon dating analysis revealed that the stone landed on Earth between 2,500 and 17,000 years ago. Pieces of the Petone Skystone have been collected and regarded as highly valuable. Today, the story of the Petone Skystone has regained interest due to the Ancient Aliens of the History Channel. It was featured on here and started up a whole new conversation. The mystery of the sky stones, however, may be coming to an end. This is because various companies have tested the stone. There is still some belief in its strangeness. Various researchers have tried to get their hands on samples of this rock, but it's proven to be difficult. One dealer in Hong Kong is said to have had a piece of this rock. When the dealer took it to be tested, he said that the results concluded that the rock was unidentifiable and that no one could determine its composition. A researcher tried to purchase this piece of stone from the dealer, but the dealer didn't want to sell it to him because of how rare it was. The researcher left empty-handed. A sample remained on display at Switzerland's Erich von Daniken's museum, together with the statues that represented the strange beings from the sky. Unfortunately, the museum couldn't give away the sample of the stone. As a last resort, the research went back to the same gem dealer from Hong Kong, and to his surprise, the dealer was open to talks. The researcher then took the stone to the University of Washington's Division of Earth and Space Sciences. They tested the stone on the 6th of March, 2019. In a twist, they too verified that the stone is unlike anything on Earth. This has only caused some people to speculate where this interesting stone came from, and so far various different theories have been put forward. So what do you make of these interesting discoveries? Paranormal is a subject that interests many of us. For many years now, people have been coming forward with their alleged encounters. One photograph is this one that shows a family reunion. The story goes that a family reunion was taking place in New Zealand, and this was sometime during the 1930s. Some have said, however, that it wasn't just the family that was snapped in this photograph. If you look towards the back of the photo, you can see what appears to the story then goes that several family members came forward and said that there was something living in their house. The spirit was said to make itself known to the family. One member said that while sleeping they suddenly woke up. This wasn't normal for them, and so they started to look around the room. This is when they saw the apparition of a woman at the end of the bed. They described the woman as wearing a white dress. This has reminded many of the lady in white. It appears that not only are there several cases of strange sightings of ghostly female figures with long black hair wearing a long white gown, with many different origin stories of the spirit featuring tragic tales, but that these spirits appear all across the world in many different countries completely isolated from the myth. This has caused many to speculate the apparition they saw was the lady in wind. Some of the family members have suggested it could have been one of their ancestors, and that this individual now looks over the family. Another haunted location is that of Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond. A large burial ground full of skeletons is always going to be a scary prospect for some, but Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, USA has built up a reputation as being one of the most haunted locations in America. Named after its Holly dreams, the Hollywood Cemetery is one of the most famous graveyards in America. The site spans 135 acres and boasts many impressive monuments dating back to the early 20th century, such as the President's Circle and Charles Dimmock's 90-foot stone pyramid, marking the spot where 18,000 Confederate soldiers who fought in the Civil War are buried. Not only this, but Hollywood Cemetery is also known for its famous burials, which include 3 of America's presidents, James Monroe, John Tyler, and Jefferson Davis, a Supreme Court justice and 6 Virginia governors. However, what has earned Hollywood Cemetery its scary reputation is the hauntings that have been reported there. Groundkeepers, tourists, and locals claim to have experienced strange, phenomenal nights that range from sightings of a vampire, voices heard from the pyramid, and reports of the ghost of a little girl playing with her dog. These hauntings have been reported here so persistently that Satanists have gathered there. And William Wortham Paul wrote a book titled Haunted Richmond. The sighting of a Richmond vampire was first reported on October the 2nd in 1925. This was when witnesses claimed to have seen a blood-covered creature with jagged teeth and skin hanging from its muscular body. They saw the creature running across the cemetery. It was largely agreed that the figure was a 28-year-old rail fireman known as Benjamin F. Mosby. The tunnel he had been working on at Churchill had collapsed and the boiler had erupted, resulting in him being horribly scalded with layers of skin hanging from his body and several of his teeth shattered. His damaged body matched the reports of the supposed vampire, and it was believed that people had witnessed most of these last moments as he desperately ran for help. He later died at Grace Hospital. However, this hasn't stopped people retelling the story of the Richmond vampire. There are also reports late at night of the ghost of a little girl playing with her dog by her grave. The little girl's surname was Reese, and her grave is located close to Dimmock's pyramid. Reese started at the age of 3 from scarlet fever. What is not known is how the statue of a 3-foot-high black cast iron dog ended up next to her grave. These are the three main theories. The first is that the girl's family wanted the dog to watch over their daughter in the afterlife. The second says that to save their assets, her family put the statue near her grave to prevent it from being melted down. And the third tells of an anonymous shopkeeper. Remembering how much Reese had loved the dog perched in the front of his store, decided to leave the statue to her. Whatever the reason for the placement of the dog, people who visit the grave have reported hearing it barking or growling. Furthermore, grounds crew have described how when they pass by the dog it's pointing one way, and when they return it's pointed in the other. A third report is voices being heard that appear to come from Dimex Pyramid. As previously mentioned, the pyramid was built to honor the thousands of Confederate soldiers buried in the cemetery. However, since its construction, soft moans have been heard coming from around and inside the pyramid early in the morning and at dusk. People have also reported coming into contact with cold spots at various corners of the pyramid. This has led some to conclude that all the noises are coming from all the unidentified soldiers who rest their spirits are trapped in the pyramid. Another theory is that these voices come from the workers who lost their lives when the Churchill Tunnel collapsed. While record-keeping on the crew wasn't detailed, at least 1 or 2 of the 200 or so laborers inside were buried alive. Attempts to recover the bodies were quickly abandoned and they remain buried inside the tunnel. Another mysterious location is that of Squire's Castle. Squire Castle is known to be one of Cleveland's most picturesque locations. Sitting grandly in Wilbura Hills, the views from the castle are beautiful. Its front yard is a huge grassy field and its backyard is a mountainous incline. But it's not just the brilliant views that draws the thousands of visitors each year. It's also the reports that Squire's Castle is haunted. Interestingly, Squire's Castle was never meant to be a castle. The wealthy and recluse Fergus B. Squire was vice president and general manager of the Standard Oil Company. He decided to build a 525-acre residential compound called the River Farmer's Stane, and it was to be accompanied by himself and his wife, Rebecca. Squire's Castle was actually intended to be the residence for gatekeeper of the River Farmer's Stane, which was never built. It's believed Squire gave up on the construction project because his wife Rebecca hated the idea of living in the country. Squire sold the property to a private developer and relocated to Wycliffe, where he built the massive estate of Cobblestone Garth. Before moving, Squire and his family used the castle as a weekend retreat. Though only intended for a gatekeeper, the place still boasted several bedrooms, living areas, a large kitchen, and a library. It was at this location in 1920 that some believe Squire's wife lost her life. The story goes that Rebecca woke one night during a storm and went downstairs to investigate. The lightning from the storm illuminated the stuffed heads of animals in the library, which shocked her so much she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Many have dismissed this as completely fictitious and point toward Mrs. Squire's death certificate, which shows she died of a stroke 5 years after the castle property was owned. But there are reports of red lights at night within the castle grounds, which some believe is Rebecca's ghost holding onto a red lantern as she roams around the halls and rooms of the castle she so hated. Last place is that of Leap Castle. Long regarded as one of Ireland's most haunted destinations, Leap Castle has been featured on a number of ghost hunting and paranormal shows. The property is located in Coldberry in Bloss's historical bloodshed, as families have been divided fighting over the true ownership of the castle. The castle was first constructed by the O'Bannon clan in the 12th century. It was originally known as Leap of the because the castle was built by the two Oberon brothers, contesting the chieftainship of their family, decided to challenge each other to leap from Iraq. The agreement was that the sole survivor would not only govern the family, but also be responsible for the castle's construction. As can be seen, the castle was built on a foundational bloodshed. The O'Bannons did not manage to rule Leap Castle for long. As a family, they were subservient to the O'Carroll clan, who soon seized the property. The O'Carroll clan had a reputation of being ruthless and fueled by greed and power, so when the chief of the family died without specifically naming which one of his sons wanted to be his successor, Leap Castle was once again the site of a brotherly feud. The story goes that his brother killed Thaddeus while he was in the middle of saying a mass in the castle's chapel. The chapel became known as the Bloody Chapel. and it's said that you can still see Thaddeus' spirit roaming around it later in the night. Under the O'Carrolls, Leap Castle reportedly became home to many massacres. During renovations of the castle in the 1990s, a secret dungeon was discovered that contained human skeletons and wooden spikes. It's believed the O'Carrolls would have used the wooden spikes as a method of surprise attack for unsuspecting visitors to the castle. One of their most wicked crimes was towards the McMahon family. The McMahon family were invited to a dinner to celebrate their victory over a rival clan of the O'Carrolls. However, rather than thank the MacMahonans, the O'Carrolls poisoned them. Alongside Thaddeus' spirit, the McMahon family are also said to haunt the grounds of Leap Castle. The castle again switched ownership in the 1600s, and once again the process involved blood being spilled. It's said that a daughter of the reigning Oak Herald chiefsdame fell in love with an English prisoner being kept in the castle's dungeon. This prisoner was Captain Darby, and he prepared an escape plan from Leap Castle with the Oak Herald daughter. Their plan was interrupted when they ran into the girl's brother on the stairwell. What ensued was a sword fight between Darby and the Oak Herald brother, and Darby was the victor. What's more, on the death of the Oak Herald brother, Leap Castle passed to the O'Kell daughter and Darby. The two married and set home in the castle. As a captain of war, Darby had amassed his own treasures and began to hide these objects throughout the castle. Losing his grip on sanity, he forgot where he'd hidden these treasures and searched for them. It's said that today this mad captain's spirit still wanders around Leap Castle, desperately seeking his treasures. Jonathan Charles Darby was a descendant of Captain Darby and resides in the castle with his wife Mildred Darby. Mildred was a writer who underwent the pseudonym of Andrew Mary and wrote many Gothic stories. It's believed the inspiration of her scary stories was from her own experience living at Leap Castle. In her personal letters, she writes of explaining a supernatural entity she refers to as the thing and the elemental. She writes of feeling a hound on her shoulder and turning around to see a gaunt, shadow, and inhuman being. This being smelt like a decomposing corpse and immediately caused a deadly nausea to Mildred. Alongside it, there have been many sightings of a red lady walking the halls holding a dagger. The story behind her dates back to when the O'Carrolls held Leap Castle. She was thought to have been a prisoner who was used by the O'Carrolls. When she became pregnant and gave birth to a baby, her child was murdered with a dagger. Unable to cope with the loss of her child, the lady in Midi grabbed the dagger and took her life. Her spirit now roams Leap Castle looking for the men who killed her child. The current residents of Leap Castle are Sean Ryan and his wife, and Sean himself admits to hearing footsteps, doors opening and closing, and crowds talking. Strangely though, rather than reacting in fear, he has no issue with living alongside the spirit, who he believes have just as much of a right to be there as he does. That doesn't stop a lot of locals still refusing to walk past the castle at night. So what do you make of these mysterious locations? Various mysterious events have been brought to the surface in recent years. Some of these do eventually go on to get explained, but some of them remain a mystery. This mysterious photograph was allegedly taken in a cave in the Republic of Honduras. Not much is known about the photograph, but the uploader said that while in the cave they decided to take some pictures. They said it was quite dark inside, and the deeper they went the darker it got. They took some photos in a dark spot and managed to capture something they couldn't explain. When looking back at the photos, they noticed a strange apparition. They had no idea what it was and couldn't explain where the light source was coming from. The area where the photograph was taken was closed in, and they said there was nothing nearby that could have created it. Strangely, some have suggested that the light anomaly is in fact an angel, suggesting that it has the same shape and colors of many other angels that have been caught on camera. As of right now, though, the photograph remains a mystery, with the individuals not knowing what they captured on that day. Another mysterious event is that of the Hollingwell incident. The Hollingwell incident remains one of Great Britain's biggest unexplained mysteries. 30 years after the event, it still continues to puzzle experts and the local community. In the summer of 1980, the annual Hollingwell show was gearing up in Kirby in Ashfield. As part of the event, the Forest League of Juvenile Jazz Bands decided to create a junior brass and marching band competition, with entrants coming from across the East Midlands. Around 500 children from 11 different marching bands had traveled distances of up to 40 miles to attend. Tired from their journeys and nervous about the upcoming performance, the atmosphere behind the scenes was tense. However, tension alone couldn't explain where at 10:30 a.m. hundreds of band members began to collapse. Whatever had caused this soon spread to the adults and babies in the audience. In total, 259 people were taken to 4 nearby hospitals, with symptoms ranging from sore eyes and throats to nausea. 9 patients were held overnight. Hypothesis from the event on the day spanned from contaminated water, gas leaks to FOs, and even the demonic power of Satan. Water and gas companies confirmed all supplies were working as usual and should not have harmed any of the locals. The official inquiry ruled that mass hysteria was most likely the cause. All the symptoms of mass hysteria, nausea, stomach cramps, headaches, and fainting were present in Huntingwell that day, and the vast majority of victims were young females, which is also in line with mass hysteria's demographics. But could an incredibly rare epidemic of mass hysteria really explain the events of that day? Not all the people present were convinced. Adamant that their symptoms were real and not the result of mass hysteria invented by Sigmund Freud, they were unhappy with the official diagnosis. They argued that mass hysteria could not explain all of the events in Hollingwell. First, according to Freud's notes on mass hysteria, babies are much too young to be influenced by their surroundings, so would not be susceptible. However, Margaret Palethorpe brought her 3-month-old baby to the event to collapse in her pram. Secondly, Terry Bingham was one of the adult males who experienced the effects of a burning in his throat and eyes. As a fireman and miner accustomed to perilous, intense working environments, he argues he would not have been bothered by a mass hysteria event. A popular theory that has emerged since Hollingwell is that the events of the day were a result of pesticides in the atmosphere. In 2000, tridmorph was a pesticide that was banned by the British government, described as hazardous by the World Health Organization. Back in 1980, though, the pesticide was perfectly legal and found sprayed on fields that surrounded the Hollingwell surroundings. Interestingly, the symptoms the victims of Hollingwell displayed of irritated skin and eyes are known side effects of tridmouth. The only problem is whether it's likely that a chemical was sprayed several hundred yards away and several days before the Hollingwell show is to blame. Is it likely that it would have affected hundreds of people at this show? As of today, this event remains a mystery. The next interesting discovery is that of alleged 2.8 billion yield spheres. The clerk stopped spheres at small objects discovered from 3 billion yield deposits mined in South Africa. The intricate nature and resistance of these objects has led some to believe they are not natural and could have only been manufactured by intelligent beings. Michael Cremo is a prominent member of this theory. He argues that the perfect shape, intricate inside, and unbreakable nature of these objects are evidence of a pre-human civilization, and that they existed on Earth billions of years ago. He likens the objects to similar spheres found in Utah, that legends hold are 2 million years old, and belong to the departed ancestors of the Hopi Native Americans. Cream and others argue that the shapes are so balanced and in proportion that it's extremely unlikely they would naturally form. Reportedly, a man by the name of John Hurd took one of the spheres to the California Space Institute and was told its balance was so fine that it exceeded the limit of their measuring technology. The inside of the spheres have been described as being perfectly concentric rooms that look like they've been molded and are harder than steel. However, Cremo and others have been met with resistance. Paul Henrik critiques the sources used and therefore says that the research is flawed. Henrik argues that the supposed perfect shape of the spheres is exaggerated. Instead, some of the spheres vary from flattened spheres to an oblong shape. Some of them were even found interlocked with each other. All these forms would fall within the range of shapes exhibited by natural concretions. The inside of the spheres also argue by Henrik to be natural in origin. The grooves represent fine Graham laminations, within which the consecrations grew and are similar to other natural objects found 2.7 to 2.8 billion years ago in Australia. And finally, claims by Cremo and others that the spheres are stronger than steel have been dismissed. This is when 5 of them were examined and none were harder than 4 to 5 on the Mohs scale. In context, steel has a rating of between 7 and 8. Interestingly, since Henrik's critique of Cremo's wife, other sources have come out of the woodwork to deny their claims. Charles Marx had been previously quoted as stating that the spheres had been known to rotate themselves, and this was in vibration-free display cases in the Klustorp Museum. He has since retracted this statement, saying that it's untrue to say that display cases were free of outside vibrations, and that the spheres were likely rotating due to vibrations from underground blasting in local mines. Henrik has built up his case to argue that all the evidence actually points to the spheres being a natural phenomenon, rather than being the creation of a pre-human civilization. He argues that they show every sign of originating as concentrations which formed in volcanic sediments. It's ultimately up to the reader, though, whether to follow Chemo's argument, saying that the spheres are man-made artifacts, or Henrik's, which state they're a result of Mother Nature. Last discovery is that of the two-celled artifacts. The two-celled artifacts are the lead objects discovered by Charles Maynard and his family in the Pitcherrocks in Arizona. When Maynard stopped to examine some old lime kilns, he saw an object protruding from the ground. This revealed itself to be a lead cross weighing 64 pounds. Maynard's friend Thomas Brent, on hearing about the cross, hurried to the site and began excavating. A total of 31 lead objects were found, including crosses, swords, and religious objects. The objects contain Latin inscriptions that, when translated, tell a story of the leaders of Kalalos and their conflicts with a barbarian enemy known as the Talshas. If true, this would be a historical revelation. It would show that Europeans were in North America before Christopher Columbus discovered the lamp. Unsurprisingly, the Tucson artifacts and the historical information they reveal have become a controversial topic. Forensic geologist Scott Walters' chemical tests on the objects led him to confirm their authenticity, and Brent was so convinced that he wrote a 350-page manuscript titled The Tucson Artifacts. However, notably, this remains unpublished. Others have not been so accepting of the artifacts and branded them a hoax. In particular, the artifacts have come under fire for their lead quality in the Latin inscriptions. The lead that the Tucson artifacts are made of is not highly refined and contains different mixtures of tin, zinc, copper, gold, and silver. This mixture is consistent with lead from 20th century lead battery anodes, and not lead dating back thousands of years. The quality of the Latin inscriptions of the Tucson artifacts is questionable. Most looked like they'd been copied from classical authors, such as Virgil and Cicero, or texts that are widely found in Latin grammar books and dictionaries. Rather than the objects being created by the ancient people of Kalilas, it's been proposed that the objects were created by a 20th century artist. After news of the artifacts was published in newspapers, a rancher came forward and claimed the objects were the work of a Mexican sculptor, and his name was Timio Odehai. Odehai was a former classic student who lived near the site where the objects were discovered, and was known for his abilities in crafting lead objects. With a knowledge of Latin and Lend, the creation of the Tucson artifacts would have been in Odehai's range. The only problem is that, other than the rancher, nobody seems to have heard of Odehai. If the artifacts were our homes, it seems odd that he would put so much time, expense, and labor in creating an extensive collection of artifacts that he would never profit from. Whether the Tucson artifacts are the work of an ancient civilization or a sculpture is a question that remains unanswered. So what do you make of these 4 interesting events and discoveries? When people go missing, the majority of the time they turn up or are found well. However, there are cases of missing people who seem to have vanished without a trace. Despite the best efforts of search teams and loved ones, their disappearances remain unresolved and unexplained. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 mysterious disappearances. The disappearance of the Flannan lighthouse keepers. As a lighthouse keeper, work can be dangerous, and in emergency situations help is often too far away. This appeared to be the case when 3 workers, James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, sent shockwaves around the world with their sudden disappearance from Flannan Lighthouse. The disappearance was brought to light when a ship called Hesperus set sail for Eileen Moore. As previously planned, Captain James Harvey was delivering a relief lighthouse keeper to Flannan Lighthouse. However, on arrival at the lighthouse, he realized something strange was going on. The flagstaff had no flag. All the provision boxes had been left on the landing, and none of the 3 lighthouse keepers were there to welcome the ship. Even when Harvey sounded a whistle and shot a flare to try to catch the lighthouse keeper's attention, the island remained silent. A sailor, Joseph Moore, was sent on a boat to investigate further. According to reports, he experienced a sense of foreboding coming up to the lighthouse. When he arrived, he found the entrance gate and main door closed, beds unmade, clock stopped, and no sign of the lighthouse keepers in the lighthouse or on the island. Moore reported this back to Harvey, who immediately sent a telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board, stating that a dreadful accident had happened at the Flannans, where 3 keepers, Duckett, Marshall, and the occasional have disappeared from the island. Robert Muirhead, a Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, was tasked with setting up an official investigation into the incident. On arriving, Muirhead focused closely on the ropes strung along the island. From this, he theorized that in the middle of a storm, the men had gone down to the rocks to secure a box in which the mooring and landing ropes were kept, and while doing so, had been swept away. Muirhead's theory that water took out the 3 lighthouse keepers seems credible. Firstly, looking at the geography of Eileen Moore, the caves on the west would have been flooded by water in high seas or storms, and this water would then explode out with considerable force and cause the type of wall of water that could have swept the 3 lighthouse keepers away. Alternatively, a storm could have washed the men away. The island was known to have experienced its share of storms. Duckett had experienced his dislike of the dangerous weather to his family before, and the construction of the lighthouse took 2 years longer than planned due to delays caused by rough seas and harsh weather. On the island, there was evidence of recent storms as the iron railings of the trolley tramway had broken in several places and the box containing the ropes had vanished, despite having been firmly anchored into a crevice. One thing Muirhead could not explain was why 3 experienced lighthouse keepers would risk going out in stormy weather conditions. This question was answered when James Love's research on the mysterious case unveiled that Marshall had previously been fined 5 shillings for equipment that had been washed away in a gale. Love used this fresh piece of evidence to strengthen Muirhead's theory. It was the fear of having another fine imposed for washed-away equipment that led the men to leave the lighthouse and go to the rocks. Love argues that MacArthur had stayed in the lighthouse, but seeing danger approach, the other 2 keepers had rushed out without his coat to warn them, before also being swept away. With Love's modifications, Muirhead's theory sounds plausible. However, it still could not answer why Moore found the entrance gate and main door closed when arriving at the lighthouse. They surely wouldn't have had time to lock up the lighthouse, particularly if they thought they would soon be returning. The theory also fails to explain the log entries supposedly written by the 3 missing lighthouse keepers. These log entries hint that unusual events were taking place before their disappearance. Marshall writes of severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years, that left Duckett very quiet and MacArthur crying. Given the men's experience in marine work and MacArthur's reputation for brawling, this behavior seems out of character. Log entries on the 13th of December mention a raging storm that left all 3 men praying, which is puzzling as they would have known they were safe in a secure lighthouse structure far above sea level. Even stranger is that no storms were recorded during these dates. This has led some to believe paranormal activity was taking place on the island. Eileen Moore has a history of unsettling accounts. This chapel was said to move even the most non-religious person to worship and rituals, such as circling the building on your knees. Herders would never dare allow their sheep to graze overnight because they believed the land to be haunted, and there were tales of sightings of strange creatures such as giant birds and little men. Some say that this paranormal atmosphere might have led the 3 lightkeepers to madness. Known to be a volatile man, might have been sent over the edge and murdered the other 2 lighthouse keepers and then taken his own life. All the 3 men might have decided to flee the island and seek greener pastures. We already know how unhappy Duckett was to be living in a lighthouse from his correspondence with home. Despite nationwide speculation, there is still no perfect solution to answer what happened to the 3 lighthouse keepers who disappeared on Eileen. The disappearance of Drake Kramer. Drake Kramer was 21 years old and looking forward to studying geology at college. Described as a loving and caring young man, it came as a shock when one day in 2015, he traveled alone to the Grand Canyon and was never seen again. Despite extensive searches involving helicopters and teams of searcher dogs trailing along dozens of miles of wooded areas and along the canyon rim, no evidence about Kramer's whereabouts was unearthed. Kramer's friends and family could not understand his actions. Excited about his upcoming studies, it made no sense that Kramer would suddenly pick up and leave everything without informing anyone. Just 2 days before Kramer was reported missing, he accompanied his father to a showing of American Sniper and was described as having been in good spirits throughout the evening. As a lover of nature, the Grand Canyon was one of Kramer's favorite places to be. In a Facebook post following a visit to the site with his aunt, he wrote of wishing he could stay there. But Kramer had never expressed interest before of going to the Grand Canyon alone. What's more, his father doubted whether Kramer had even taken the appropriate hiking gear with him. Kramer would have been more than aware of the dangerous winter conditions along the South Rim, which could be extremely snowy, with icy roads and trails and possible road closures. It seems absurd he would not have prepared himself properly for the excursion. This has led some to believe Kramer might have been suicidal. Before his disappearance, Kramer sent out a text message telling his loved ones that he had to give his body to Mother Earth. This might be an innocent reference to his love of the outdoors, but it could also be read in a darker light and indicate Kramer's depressed mental state at the time. Whichever way you read Kramer's message, the facts remain the same. Over 5 years later, there is still no sign of him, leaving his loved ones still searching for answers. The disappearance of Matthew Green. Matthew Green was a beloved maths teacher in Nazareth and an outdoor enthusiast who was last seen in 2013 in the Mammoth Lakes area. Green was hiking with friends in the region and staying at the Shady Rest campground. Due to car trouble, he was unable to join his friends on a trail and instead agreed to stay behind while his car was repaired and then meet up with them down the line. That day, he called the car repair shop and his parents to inform them that he was spending one more day in the mountains and texted friends in the evening. Green was never seen or heard from after this. When his friends returned to find his car had been fixed and waiting for him for over a week, they contacted the Mammoth Lake Police Department. Green had told his parents he was spending a day in the mountains in his final phone call, but he had not specified where. Green's loved ones started looking at the evidence at hand to predict where he had headed. Green had previously mentioned wanting to climb on glacier ice and had a habit of tearing out pages from his guidebook for the adventures he was pursuing. The pages missing were the rugged and icy terrain around Mount Ritter. Pouncing on this new lead, several of Green's friends and family flew to California and to shoot high-resolution videos over the land. Despite best efforts, there was no sighting of Green, and a Pennsylvania judge declared him dead 4 days after his disappearance. Hopes were raised when a pair of eyeglasses strikingly similar to the ones worn by Green were found by a hiker in the Inyo Craters region. But these were later confirmed not to be Green's. With little evidence and nobody ever found, Green's fate remains a mystery. His family and friends mostly believe that Green was injured on the trail and either died immediately or eventually succumbed to the elements. Mount Ritter is an extremely challenging terrain, likened to climbing a stack of crackers, that even the most experienced climber would struggle on. With peaks reaching 13,000 feet, any misstep of Green's would have resulted in a fall which would almost certainly have killed him. However, Green was known to be an experienced and cautious mountaineer. Aware of the hardship of the trail, he would have been extra careful and critical in his movements, and if he thought the situation was getting too difficult, he would have turned back. This doubt has led Green's sister to wonder whether her brother was actually a victim of foul play. Green might have hitched a ride from another given his car had broken down or had a run-in with the workers in the car repair shop. Have never been given closure to the case of what happened to the popular maths teacher. They continue to use the Find Matthew Green Facebook page for any further updates. But what do you make of these mysterious disappearances? Going back in December of 2019, pigeons were spotted around Las Vegas. What was odd, though, is the fact that these birds were wearing cowboy hats and sombreros. When the reports first came in, people that weren't from that area thought it was a hoax, and that someone was photoshopping hats onto birds as a joke. However, locals of the region managed to capture some photographs of these birds, and it turns out they were in fact wearing cowboy hats. It turned into somewhat of a joke when the images were posted around, but when the birds flew away and the hats didn't fall off, some concerns were raised. Animal welfare workers came forward and said this was no laughing matter, and that whoever was doing this needed to be stopped. Some of the birds were seen around the McCarran International Airport and the University of Nevada. One local animal shelter worker said the following about the reports. When we saw them today, you could see some loose feathers on the glue around their hat. It's definitely a concern. One video of the birds had over 2 million views. Reviewers quit to give them the names of Clark Norris and Calamity Jane. One of the problems this created is people reported he started going out of their way to put more of these cowboy hats on the birds. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department even got involved and said the following to the New York Times. It does not appear to be a police matter at this time. Interestingly, when all these reports were coming forward, the rodeo was in town, and some have said this could have been done by them to promote the show. Animal shelter workers said the headgear had stayed on the birds for several days, so a tough glue was used in keeping the huts on them for so long. Lofty Hop's pigeon rescue did manage to capture one of the birds. This was as it was seen walking on the streets of Vegas. This pigeon had a cowboy hat stuck to its head. Further reports from the rescue center said that after a few days the bird had passed away, and this may have been due to the fumes from the glue. The rescue center said the following. The staff and volunteers at the Lofty Hopes are saddened to report that Billy the Pinch, one of the cowboy pigeons in the red hats, has passed away of an undetected illness. The hat could have interfered with her being able to dislodge small insects from under it. And pigeons are very active groomers not just for themselves, but for others in their flocks. The fumes of the glue could have slowly poisoned her. Pigeons have a very fragile respiratory system, so many things could have gone wrong. They went on to say the following. From the time we spotted and captured her, she didn't have the same fight in her. She was a pretty easy capture. She had multiple objects embedded in the skin. We are truly saddened by her loss and will always remember her struggle. Wildlife researchers are keeping an eye on the birds in the area. They have said that whoever did this to these birds should be ashamed. Although to them it may seem like a joke, the health of these birds dramatically decreased while having these hats glued to their heads. So what do you guys make of this? Recently, this photograph has been making the rounds online. It allegedly shows a man wearing a hazardous material suit while installing a 5G tower. Some have claimed that there was a problem with the tower, and that locals had been complaining of animals that were passing away close to the tower. One of the most popular theories about these towers is that they cause us health issues, and that various companies across the world are trying to hide this information. Some have said that they've seen people installing these towers while wearing hazardous material suits. So what's the truth behind this photo? Researchers have come forward and said that this makes no sense. Various websites, including Snopes, have come forward and said that they've debunked the photo. They said that although these towers do give off electromagnetic radiation, it's not enough to cause humans harm. Other websites, including those that revolve around cancer treatment, have said that these forms of non-ionizing radiation do not directly damage the DNA inside cells. Others have also pointed out the suit doesn't look like a typical hazardous material suit. One person claimed that they work in these 5G towers and what the man is most likely doing is removing a bee's nest. He went on to say that these bees can be a problem for towers like this, and that when they nest there they have to be removed. Others, however, are not so convinced, saying that they've seen strange animal behaviors around these towers. The photograph started to get shared around in late 2019, and since then a variety of explanations have been put forward for why the mammals were in the zoons. Going back in 2019, it was reported that between 230 and 315 birds passed away from unknown causes close to Ainsley. Locals who witnessed the event described it as looking unnatural, and said that many birds suddenly dropped from the sky. After law enforcement was called, several of these birds were taken away in order to see if something had happened to them internally. The go-to answer in these situations is that the birds had been poisoned. But as many have pointed out, it's very unlikely they would all drop at once. A few residents close by did report hearing loud noises shortly before the birds were found. This caused some people to suggest the military was involved, or even testing a new type of aircraft. The Ministry of Defense did, however, release a statement saying the birds' fate was not caused by them, and that there was no connection between them and what happened. Interestingly, out of the hundreds of birds that were discovered, none were found in the nearby fields. Rather, they were all discovered on their own. something that made the police officers at the time question what really happened. Sadly, when it comes to these types of events, it's rarely that you'll get an answer for what happened. Some have suggested that nearby towers that were erected could have been the cause of the bird's death. Following statements have been released by companies that work around and wear 5G towers. Cell tower workers do not have to wear hazmat suits while working with 5G equipment. Cell tower workers do not have to wear anything special for 5G that they didn't wear for 3G or 4G. So my question to you guys is, what do you make of 5G towers? The last few years, Tom DeLonge has expressed his interest in unidentified flying objects. He said that he's been fascinated with them for years. While on tour, he would read books that explored the possibility of extraterrestrials, and since then he's been hooked. Recently, Tom came forward on Instagram and said that he'd witnessed an unidentified aerial phenomenon. He said the following about his encounter. So last night, I get a text from somebody that there was an unidentified air phenomena right off the beach where I live. I ran to my balcony and saw it split into two pieces and raised vertically. I grabbed Marie, jumped in my truck, and went straight down to the beach. We were the only ones on the beach last night as this light disappeared. Reappeared, broke into three pieces and stacked vertically, with one little red dot flying around the top and then disappearing for the rest of the evening. This video doesn't show much, but we were up quite late watching the light dance, about half a mile to a mile off the beach. It was huge and it was fiery orange. Of course, I called up Lou Elizondo as I was there, and he was telling me all the things I was supposed to do with the location. Geographic details, weather, altitude, and distance. Of course, I was completely worthless when it came to these details, but it was a big deal. Lou checked immediately, and there was no flights in the area except the one I had my eye on the entire time. No military, no boats, and a bunch of hovering lights that were stacked on top of each other. It was wild. Who knows? Various people were impressed with the footage, even coming forward and saying that they had seen similar objects. Recently, it was announced by Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars Academy that they were working with the U.S. government in regards to their unidentified aerophenomenal discovery. The company has also said they've brought on some leading researchers on AI and that they're working on a new service. To the Stars Academy posted the following. As part of our AI initiatives, we've built a compelling service for post-ingestion and analysis processing, which marks an instance authentic if it passes human and machine learning analysis. These datasets will help us analyze future ingested media and clean up unnecessary data. Tom then went on to say the following. This is a very exciting technology we've built. It can be used for numerous defense requirements as well as its primary mission to track unidentified air phenomenon. Further saying the following. I'm proud to be collaborating with the U.S. government on the unidentified air phenomenon issue. It's been a lifelong dream to be sitting in this seat where I and my team at the To the Stars Academy can help understand the issue. First, we start with the U.S. Army testing our anomalous material, purportedly from an unidentified air phenomenon crash. Although this is great news in the sense that Tom and his company are making connections. Others have worried about the path he's going down. It's important to remember, though, that a UFO is simply an object that someone cannot identify at that moment in time. As of right now, Thomas said it's an exciting time for him and his company. So what do you make of this interesting video? The Vikings are perhaps best known for being one of the first to discover the New World. Their incredible boats rival the construction methods of other civilizations. Their stories have been told over generations. One of the biggest mysteries in regards to the seafaring people, though, is why they were so aggressive and violent on the battlefield. Researchers have come forward and said that some of their torture devices have backed up their violent behavior. Despite a number of incredibly successful invasions and raids made all across Europe, by the year 1066 it appeared that the Vikings completely disappeared from the European record. Historians have said that for some reason they stopped making any advancements of any kind by that year. At first, researchers were completely baffled as to why the Vikings' conquest would end nearly overnight, requiring a number of archaeologists to work together to pore over old documents to better understand what happened. When looking closer at the Vikings' lifestyle, it became obvious, though, that the Scandinavians were still expanding within their own areas and developing their civilization. The change in politics led to the exchange of wealth, causing massive income inequalities all throughout Scandinavia. This meant that though the overall quality of life was raised and everyone became wealthier, there was only a few that held a massive amount of wealth amongst themselves. Given the fact that raiding was more of a necessity for those living in poverty, there were less Vikings to be found as the standard of living was raised. Additionally, due to the massive amount of income equality, very few were willing to make the substantial investment to construct fleets for invasion, as those with the money to make it happen were more than content with their wealth and saw very little reward in their aid. Regardless, their might on the battlefield was so notorious that it got passed down over the years. Researchers have announced they couldn't understand why they were so confident and successful on the battlefield. But this new research may have just provided us with the answer as to why they were so aggressive. The Berserker Vikings were said to have fought in a trance state, and researchers think they've got to the bottom of what put them in this state. A paper published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology said the following. The Berserkers were said to have not just been ordinary warriors, rather to fight while in a specific trance-like state, which was likely helpful in disassociating them from the close-up atrocities they would have seen and committed in battle. This state has been claimed to involve anger, increased strength, and a dull sense of pain. These warriors likely took hyacinus, a plant that caused a variety of effects on the human body. Most of these match the stories from this era, although researchers have said the Vikings would have suffered days after taking this plant. Some of the effects include that of headaches and blurred vision for days after battle. As of right now, it's likely that this hallucinogenic plant played a role on why they were so aggressive on the battlefield. So what do you make of this theory? And do you think the Vikings used this plant before battle? It's important to remember that a UFO is simply an object that someone cannot identify at that moment in time. Over the years, there's been some interesting testimonies and evidence that have been presented. This video is currently making its way around social media. It shows what appears to be unidentified flying objects close to the moon. The uploader of the video, Jean-Michael Tannick, explains that the video was captured by a friend of theirs. They said the following about the footage. This video is not mine. A friend passed it on to me. It was filmed towards Montreal in the late afternoon. He told me the following. I regularly film the moon by day, mostly at the time of the first and last crescent. I think that if a hidden activity must be visible on the moon, it's at this moment when the population does not observe it, because its day in the first or last crescent makes it more discreet in the sky. Many people are impressed with the footage. You can see what appears to be several mysterious objects flying close to the moon. They can only be seen because the camera has been zoomed in. Various people have suggested if it wasn't for the camera zoom you wouldn't know they was there. Others have said it's one of the best pieces of UFO footage they've seen in a long time. You can clearly see what appears to be large objects flying close to the moon. One individual said the following. I often video the moon through my telescope, and on a few occasions I've seen mysterious objects like this. Every so often they'll show up, and whatever they are, they seem to be fascinated with the moon. Interestingly, I only usually see them during the day. I've had my telescope set up during the night and I don't usually see them during this time. I have no idea what they are, but they are certainly interesting to watch. This is the footage that was uploaded. So what do you guys make of this footage? Going back in February, residents in Rome reported a worrying event. Hundreds of birds suddenly dropped to the ground. This news came shortly after police in North Wales investigated a similar occurrence. In this case, hundreds of birds had dropped to the ground under mysterious circumstances. Fast forward 2 months, and this was reported by residents in Rome. Strangely enough, residents reported that the birds acted very similar to those in Wales, saying they were flying around in circles and then suddenly dropped to the ground. What's odd, though, is how many of these cases are happening so close to each other. As many have pointed out, it seems these mass buried deaths are happening every month, and as of right now, no one seems to know why. Although researchers have given a variety of reasons why mass buried deaths can happen, it's unusual for them to be happening around the same time as each other. One resident in Rome said the following about the event. Me and my friend were close to the area when this happened. We could hear the birds going crazy and flying around in circles. I've lived in this area for years and I've never seen anything like this before. No one seemed to be sure why they were acting this way. They were flying like this for over 45 minutes before this started to drop one by one. It was like something from a movie. It was actually really scary. It was like something was affecting them that we couldn't see. It's reported that hundreds of birds were found in Rome shortly after this event, with some saying the numbers were in the thousands. One source reported that the mass dive was due to strong winds. This explanation, however, wasn't met with open arms, and others suggested that something else was at play. Scientists and researchers have investigated this phenomena over the years, and different theories have been put forward. Various things can affect these birds. This ranges from electromagnetic currents to things like poisons. As some have pointed out though, if these animals are poisoned, is it likely they would all drop at once and in the same area as each other? In these situations, all of the birds can be found very close to one another. Some have said it's as if these birds were zapped with something, and whatever passed through them caused them to pass away in the spot. It does also seem as though these cases have increased in the past year. Various reports have emerged from countries such as England, Wales, the Netherlands, and now Italy, and these are only the ones that we know about. Many eyewitnesses have come forward and said that they've seen something similar, but that the majority of the time it doesn't get reported by the news. As of right now, it's clear that something is affecting these burns, with some pointing out that these cases could be linked to each other in some way. Perhaps our planet is changing, or perhaps we're the cause behind the event. Whatever it is, it seems this won't be the last case that gets reported. So what do you make of this report from Rome? And what do you think is going on at the moment in regards to these high number of bird deaths? The United States Geological Survey has come forward and announced that over 110 earthquakes hit the park. This has caused some to speculate whether the volcano is awakening. One of these large earthquakes occurred in Idaho. It's important to note that Yellowstone spread into this region, so it's a priority that these earthquakes are logged and tracked. This happened on the 1st of April. It's reported that people fucked the tremors as far as Canada. Interestingly, researchers from the U.S. Geological Survey said they're coming in waves, and that they were able to track them throughout the month of March, saying that the biggest swarms happened between the 5th of March and the 14th. However, they did continue until the end of the month. Researchers from the U.S. Geological Survey said the following: there's been 3 eruptions of the steamboat during this time. It's been an eventful month of seismic activity in the western USA, with a magnitude 5.7 earthquake near Salt Lake City, Utah on March 18th, and a magnitude 6.5 earthquake in central Idaho on the 31st of March. These earthquakes are caused by tectonic extension of the region and are not related to Yellowstone, nor will they have a significant impact on the Yellowstone system. Some strong earthquakes in the region, like the 1983 magnitude 6.9 Burrow Peak and 1959 magnitude 7.3 earthquakes, have impacted geyser behavior, but that is due to the response of the shallow and fragile geyser channel shaking. It's not clear if the magnitude 6.5 earthquake in central Idaho will have a similar impact. Observations of geyser activity over the coming days or weeks will help to answer that question. It's things like this that are making people worry about what's going on at Yellowstone. The volcano is being constantly monitored by the United States Geological Survey, and every so often they give us updates about what's going on. Researchers in 2014 were surprised when they discovered lots of gas was being released by Yellowstone, possibly thousands more than they expected. One of the lead scientists said the following: "We had a moment where we realized that that's a lot of crustal helium coming out of Yellowstone, far more than we would have predicted." Interestingly, last year the United States Geological Survey predicted that a large earthquake would hit the region, and it seems that prediction came true. Due to all the earthquakes, it's told scientists there could have been a tectonic shift happening underneath Yellowstone. 2019 was a busy year at the Yellowstone National Park. With all this activity, it's led scientists to speculate that the largest supervolcano in the world might be about to erupt. Data has shown that in the past 12 months, over 200 earthquakes hit Yellowstone. Another piece of news to come out of Yellowstone last year was that of 50 seismic trackers around Yellowstone pit up on dramas. Another study has shown researchers that the Yellowstone volcano is sitting on top of a hotspot. This means that every so often magma will start to rise to the surface. Rather worryingly, Scientists have said that should an earthquake occur, it could take less than 2 weeks before a catastrophic reaction is triggered. Researchers have said that if it did blow, it could set off a chain of events. It appears that the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano would be roughly 10,000 times larger in estimated cubic kilometers than that of the eruption at Mount St. Helens, and would be roughly equivalent to 300,000 explosions the size of the atomic weapon dropped in Hiroshima. As of right now, researchers are keeping a close eye on the data. So what do you make of this recent update? And do you think the Yellowstone supervolcano will erupt anytime soon? The International Space Station is one of the most famous spacecrafts that orbits our planet. It's a large spacecraft, and over the last few years, various astronomers have called this place home. However, while looking at the tracker, one individual noticed something strange. Now, it's important to note that unidentified flying objects, or unidentified aerial phenomena, are merely objects that can't be explained at that moment in time. The majority of these objects are spotted on Earth, and most of the time they do eventually get explained. The most common explanations are wildlife planes, balloons, weather phenomena, and military activities. So what happens then when these objects are captured on official NASA cameras that are projecting the cosmos? This is exactly what happened when one individual was able to capture this footage. The mysterious objects can be seen entering the screen, and interestingly, others have come forward and said that they've seen something similar while looking at these cameras. Other objects can be seen following whatever is on screen. The individual reported that not long after this came onto the screen, the video was soon cut off. One person said the following: "I've been looking through these cameras recently and I've seen some strange things. I have no idea what they are, and they are much harder to explain than objects that are seen on Earth. Here's the video. Big thing. So settle down, baby. Definitely not a fucking satellite. Something's behind it coming in. That's what I'm getting on my TV. So what do you guys make of this footage?" Researchers have said that as of today, 2 interstellar objects have been observed entering our solar system. The first went by the name of Oumuamua, and the second has been called C-2019 Borisov. It's been called Comet C-2019 Q4. It's also named after the astronomer that discovered it, a man called Gennady Borisov. After other researchers were able to see the object, they noticed it was on a hyperbolic orbit. This suggests that the celestial object wanted to get away from our solar system. As you can imagine, many people have asked why these interstellar objects are entering our solar system. Why is this happening now? Or has this been happening for decades and it's only been in the last few years we've been able to pick up on it? Astronomers decided to carry out further tests and were able to pick up on some of the object's characteristics. There's been a lot of speculation as to what this object is. A recent announcement has been made by scientists, and they said the comet revealed no signs of technosignatures, essentially meaning there's no advanced intelligent life on the celestial body. The news was released by the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. However, as has been pointed out, this is just one of many objects, and the likelihood is that there's life out there somewhere. It's just not on this specific body. The most recent discovery, though, is that this object is now breaking apart. A rather sad end, researchers have said, bearing in mind that it's traveled light years across space to end up in our solar system. The most recent update has come from the Hubble telescope. Researchers who looked over the data said the following: "Images from UT 2020 March show a single inner brightness call, like that observed in all previous Hubble Space Telescope images of Borisov." David DeWitt of the University of California, Los Angeles went on to say the following: "In contrast, images from U2 2020 March show a clearly non-stellar core, consistent with 2 unresolved components separated by 0.1 arcseconds, 180 kilometers at the distance of the comet, and aligned with the main axis of the largest dust comma." According to the most recent updates, the researchers have said that it's very likely this comet is now in bins. Researchers have said they're going to keep an eye on the data and update us about what Borisov gets up to. These interstellar objects have been at the center of much discussion. This created interest in where these objects come from and how they've managed to find their way into our solar system. One of the main questions is that, are these objects under intelligent control? Steve Croft from UC Berkeley's SETI Research Center said the following: "If interstellar travel is possible, which we don't know, And if other civilizations are out there, which we don't know, and if they are motivated to build an interstellar probe, then some fraction greater than zero of the objects that are out there are artificial interstellar devices. Just as we do with our measurements of transmitters and extrasolar planets, we want to put a limit on what that number is. So what do you make of these interstellar visitors? Over the years, there's been many strange reports. Although most of these end up getting solved, some of them remain unanswered. One interesting account is that of military soldiers that encountered a mysterious being. The story goes that back in 2002, a military unit encountered a giant being in Kandahar. American soldiers were trekking up a mountainside when they saw signs of a large being. Footsteps could be seen in the area, and so the soldiers decided to investigate to see what they could find. While looking around the mountainside, they could hear strange grunting noises. This was when they saw a large humanoid run out of a cave. They reported that the being was over 13 feet tall and had red hair. It had 6 fingers on each hand and was hostile towards the military unit. One of the men unfortunately didn't make it as he was pierced by the being's large spear. The giant was said to be dressed in animal skins. This whole mission came about because a military unit went missing in the area. This caused another unit to go looking for them. However, when they did, they ended up finding more than what they bargained for. After the soldier got pissed with the spear, it then turned his attention to the rest of the group. The others quickly fired at the giant, hitting all over his body. They continued to do this until the giant dropped to its knees. After this, the unit reported it to their superiors. They gave them clear instructions to hide the body and stay near it, ensuring that no one nearby saw what they were trying to hide. After this, the body was taken to a secure location, and allegedly the soldiers were told not to talk about this incident. One of the issues with this story, though, is that there's no evidence to back it up, and all we have today are these alleged claims. Interestingly, this story reminded many people of the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave, saying that these beings have been reported for years all over the planet. Many of the Native American legends relate to the stories of tribes of giants that roamed the earth at one point in time. One such legend comes from the Paiute tribe that lived in the Nevada region 1,000 years ago. This remarkable legend is about a mysterious race of red-haired giants, also known as the Sea-Tikar. According to the legend, these red-haired giants haunted humans and also ate them. These giants came to America from an unknown island. They crossed the oceans on rafts that they had built using fibrous plants. According to the native legend, the red-haired giants waged war on the tribe and other neighboring tribes. They also terrorized the tribes for many years. Finally, they decided to unite against this fierce enemy race. Their unity and consistency in fighting the red-haired giants resulted in the death of the giant race. The last remaining giants ran away and sought shelter in a cave. The tribes then went to these caves and started a fire at the entrance. This was in order to burn and suffocate these giants inside the cave. After that, the tribe sealed the mouth of the cave. This legend of the red-haired giants could have easily been dismissed had there not been similar tales of cannibal red-haired giants among other Native American tribes. Interestingly, between the years of 1912 and 1924, something remarkable happened. A group of archaeologists from the University of California discovered a number of strange objects inside the Lovelock Cave. Among the objects were the mummies of red-haired giants. These mummies were 8 to 10 feet in height. As they were found in the Lovelock Cave, these giants were named the Lovelock Giants. The archaeologists also discovered a pair of giant sandals, far too large to fit an average human's feet. These sandals were 15 inches long and had signs that showed they were once worn by someone. Researchers also discovered a handprint on one of the stones in the Lovelock Cave. The imprint came from a massive hand. Many of the items found in the Lovelock Cave are today held in many different museums and private collections. In 1931, 2 large skeletons of red-haired giants were found buried close to the Lovelock Cave. These amazing discoveries have led several people to believe that at one point in time these giant humans did exist. Another interesting account is that of the Maelstrom Air Force Base UFO. Our next mystery begins on March the 24th, 1967 in Roy, Montana. This was around 60 feet below ground in the missile launch bunker of Monstrum Air Force Base, and this happened during the peak of the Cold War. This bunker was in control of 10,800 kilotons of nuclear warheads, which were codenamed the Minuteman I. Sometime during the morning hours, the missile control men got a call from a terrified guard station above the bunker. They reported seeing a flying, glowing red object that would accelerate and stop in an instant. It would then reverse its course, turn a 90-degree angle, and seemingly defy all laws of physics. Those who saw the craft and heard the story said that it was unlike any man-made aircraft. As the men were informing the commander of the base what was going on, the unthinkable then happened. All 10 missile control lights switched from green to red. All 10 missiles were disabled at the exact same time. With this, America's missile shield was down. This terrified the men even more as this was a hot time during the Cold War, and the threat of nuclear retaliation was the only thing holding back both sides from annihilating each other. As the crew tried to get the missiles back online, they contacted another missile crew on the base. What they discovered was bone-chilling. The week before, the second crew also reported seeing the unexplainable glowing object hovering above the base. As the crews were conversing, the second crew's missiles were also disabled, leaving the entire base unarmed. Shortly after, the UFO flew away never to be seen again. It took the base almost 24 hours to get the missiles back online. While missiles going red is not entirely impossible as it does happen on a very rare occasion, all missiles going off at the same time is undeniably unlikely and must have had some sort of outside influence. Another interesting incident is that of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. While many think of the highly classified Area 51 as the home of alien research and is the center of the most extensive alien cover-up in the world, many might be surprised to hear Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Greene County sits in the location that was once Walber Wright's Airfield and Far-Field Aviation General Supply Depot and is a complex of many buildings. The one of interest is that of Hangar 18. Hangar 18 is widely known by UFO enthusiasts, as it's said to be the location that the government hides the physical evidence of extraterrestrial contact, whether it be the remains of spacecraft debris, extraterrestrial equipment, and allegedly even the corpses of aliens. Allegedly, there's a highly guarded top-level clearance inside the warehouse codenamed the Blue Room, due to various sources. This location is home to the least classified information, and this comes from those that have worked there. It's widely believed that this Blue Room is the location where the United States government houses captured alien life and conducts experiments on them which often lead to termination. The notoriety of Hangar 18 goes back to the infamous Roswell event, the alleged crash in July 1947 near Roswell, New Mexico. This was where there was a recorded press release issued by the Roswell Army Airfield, stating that the personnel inspected the crash of a flying disc and that they sent it on to the headquarters for research. Shortly after there was another press release from the Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas. It claimed to be the headquarters that the remains were sent to, not Wright-Patterson, and that the remains were only that of a weather balloon. However, throughout the years the government's repeated use of the excuse of weather balloons and swamp gas became so cliché that much later in 1994, the Air Force Base went on to say this was untrue, and that it was in reality testing a surveillance device that was designed to fly over nuclear research sites in the Soviet Union, which was equally backed by a complete lack of evidence. On multiple occasions, the Air Force had denied the rumors and stated there was never a building called Hangar 18 even close to the base. However, satellite imaging has shown that to be only semi-true, as there clearly is a structure named Building 18. However, many refuse to believe the misdirection away from Wright-Patterson, as it has been officially documented as the home of Project Sign, an initiative that was signed into action in July of 1947 and was dedicated to studying reports of UFO sightings. The project was converted into Project Grunge in 1949 and then into Project Blue Book in March 1952, which led to the Blue Room theory. It was officially stated that Project Blue Book was only designed to study crashed Soviet aircraft from the Korean War. However, Senator Barry Goldwater was recorded asking General Curtis Lee May for access into the base, with which Lee May was quoted saying, "Not only can't you get into it, but don't you ever mention it to me again." A very suspicious response to requests to see a bunch of shot-down Soviet aircrafts. The last interesting report is that of a military encountering paranormal entities while on duty. Definitely seen as one of the strangest reports of modern-day encounters for the jinn, was a military encounter in Iraq back in June 2003. An Iraqi soldier and other fighters were stationed at the second floor of a police department to assist with the attacks against the police. This was between the locals and the law enforcement of the city. A lot of people were confused of this sudden attacks by the police. And so one of the main purposes of the Iraqi army was assisting with safety to uncover the reasons as to why such disturbances were taking place. In one of the reports taken by an Iraqi military squad station for 24/7 surveillance, they claimed that they encountered several jinn, of whom were watching and patrolling the station. The report details that they believed the individual was to be jinn, due to the fact they had glowing red eyes, and seen completely unfazed by the bright surveillance lights used to blind pass-by-us, of whom attempted to get too close to the station at night. Shortly after the report was filed, the entire station was attacked and every soldier and police in the department passed away from injuries. It then circulated that the jinn were at the center of the attacks, and the majority of the disturbances were caused by the jinn waging the plans of attack. After the report surfaced, the attack stopped, with many locals claiming the jinn went back into hiding after they were discovered. So what do you make of these mysterious encounters? For years, Area 51 has been shrouded in mystery. Various people have come forward and revealed information about the top-secret base. One of the issues the base faces these days is that it's not so secret. In fact, it's probably one of the most famous military bases people know about. This is due to its secretive nature and the vast amount of theories surrounding it. One of the most recent discoveries to come from this region is that of a giant tower. People were quick to pick up on a giant tower being built close to the base, and pretty much everyone commented the same thing. What is this structure? Pretty much as soon as this image made its way online, various out there theories were put forward. Some suggested that because of what's going on, Area 51 decided to install this building while everyone was distracted, with one person saying the following: "The world is currently busy and the attention on the base is at an all-time low. It seems like they've gone ahead and built a megastructure. The base has always been of interest to the public because of its backstory. However, some have come forward and said that although the base is still a mystery, the structure that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere can probably be explained." With one individual saying the following: "The most likely explanation for this is that it's a radar cross-sectioning tower. My family works for the military and they said they load craft shapes on the point and study the shapes required for invisibility to radar. These structures are known and there's nothing mysterious about them. Interesting for sure, but nothing strange is going on here. It's an interesting capture though and still shows that the base is heavily used." Another user said the following: "It's important to note that this structure is actually a few years old. It's been posted online to various groups who are now sharing it. I guess because of what's going on, a new story has been attached to it. As mentioned, one of the reasons people are so interested in this location is because of its interesting history. Various stories have come out of the base in the last few decades. Although these make for fascinating stories, there's no solid evidence of them being true. One of the first things you'll notice when you're traveling close to the base is that it's marked with orange palms. These are merely here to tell you that trespassing and photography isn't allowed. Guards can be seen around the perimeters of the base, and they immediately appear before you can even get close. Over the years, they've become known as the Camo Dunes. This is because of their clothing. They can be observed driving around in 4x4 cars and dealing with people who stray too close to the base. One interesting thing to note is that they are supposedly told not to look at the public. If you're caught by these guards, they do have the right to take away any photographs or video footage you've taken. Sensors can be found littered across the perimeter of the base, and even the road that leads down to Area 51. The minute you start driving or walk on these sensors, the guards are alerted. This is why they are always there before you are. It seems that this tower is just one of many interesting objects to be seen close to Area 51. So what do you make of this newly discovered object? Scientists have just reported that Uranus has been smashed in by a large icy body, further saying that it was around the size of our planet. Astronomers have suggested this impact happened when Uranus had just been born. It's thought that this supercharged the planet's rotation. It spins faster around its axis than Earth does. This collision remained a mystery for years, but researchers have been running simulations to try and understand what happened. A team of scientists at the Tokyo Institute of Technology think they've been able to explain the origins of Uranus. Professor Ida from the Earth Life Science Institute has said that they've uncovered data that could explain its strange properties. Their study suggested that Uranus was struck by a small icy planet. The study showed the team the objects that struck Uranus was around 3 times the mass of the Earth. The simulation showed up its moons and rings system. This helped them to understand how they were formed. This is what happened similar to Earth's moon when a rocky body made contact with our planet. NASA said the following: the Voyager 2 spacecraft visited the Uranus system in 1986 and tripled the number of known moons. Voyager 2 found an additional 10, just 26 to 154 kilometers or 16 to 96 miles in diameter. Since then, astronomers using the Hubble Space Telescope and improved ground-based telescopes have raised the total number to 27 known moons. All of Uranus's inner moons, those observed by Voyager 2, appear to be roughly half water ice and half rock. The composition of the moons outside the orbit of O'Brien remains unknown, but they are likely captured asteroids. The team said though these massive collisions were frequent in the early solar system. Professor Idzen's, this model is the first to explain the configuration of Uranus's moon system, and it may help explain the configurations of other icy planets in our solar system, such as Neptune. Beyond this, astronomers have now discovered thousands of planets around other stars, so-called exoplanets, and many observations suggest that many of the newly discovered planets known as super-Earths and exoplanetary systems may consist largely of water ice. And this model can also be applied to these planets. Other interesting features have been discovered on Uranus over the years. Observers on the ground have noticed there was a dark spot on Neptune as well as something large on Uranus. Scientists are aware that Uranus and Neptune are similar to Earth, and that these planets have seasons just like we have on Earth. This is why researchers have recently been seeing large features in the planet's atmosphere. These photographs show a large dot. This isn't uncommon for the planet, and this is actually the 4th dark vortex captured by Hubble. Researchers have come forward and said that these features don't usually hang around for very long. It's been estimated they appear every 3 to 6 years, and can fade within a year. This recent weather phenomena was discovered in September of 2018. After observing these photographs that Hubble sent back, it was thought that the storm measured a massive 6,800 miles across. That's a storm 6 times larger than our moon. These giant storms form when a flow of air is disturbed and then gets diverted upwards. The gases then freeze into methane ice crystals. So what do you make of these interesting discoveries? This photograph has been making the rounds online. Only a few websites have posted about it, and they've reported that it was taken by someone in Turkey. The individual allegedly noticed beams of light coming from the sky, and was able to quickly snap a photograph of one of them. The person didn't comment any more about it, but said that it looked like a giant laser. Whatever it is seems to have made quite a big impact on the ground. You can see smoke and debris being lifted where it makes contact. This has caused some to suggest that what we're looking at is some kind of weapon, perhaps from the military who just so happy to be testing in this area. This isn't the first time an image like this has surfaced online. When they do, they create interesting discussions with various people putting forward different theories for what they could be. As mentioned, one idea was that the military could have been using a new type of weapon in this region. Although it sounds far-fetched, this idea is based on facts. It's been announced that the U.S. Army is going forward with plans to create an extremely powerful laser weapon. The indirect fire protection capability high energy is said to be a 300 upwards kilowatt weapon. It's interesting to note that at this moment in time, the United States Navy is currently using this technology. However, the laser weapon they use is nowhere near as powerful as the one that's in development. In fact, it's reported this new laser weapon will be over 10 times more powerful than the one that's used by the United States Navy. They've reported that these laser weapons will mainly be used to tackle things like incoming missiles. It's very clear then that the United States military is very interested in this technology. They've said that they want this tech to be used by all 3 of the main services. One of the main reasons for wanting this technology is because of how efficient it is. Lasers are incredibly accurate and you don't need to keep reloading. These futuristic weapons run on energy, so as long as the military have a good source of energy, which they likely will because they have a massive budget, the weapon will essentially be able to fire out an endless amount of shots. According to Breaking Defense, they said that in early 2019 the Army planned to develop a 100-kilowatt laser weapon, but after this it was announced they wanted more. This is no longer science fiction. These newly developed lasers will be placed on trucks and will have onboard generators. They said that these lasers will enter service in early 2024. So with this news coming out, it's caused people to speculate that early tests are being carried out in different regions. One person who saw the photographs said the following: "Although I've never seen them in person, I've studied many photographs and they all seem to show something similar. A large beam of light hitting the ground and normally causing a fire. It's weird, but I'm sure wherever these energy beams are coming from they can be linked back to the military. So what do you make of this photograph? And what do you think is causing these beams of light?" For decades, UFOs have been reported across our planet. They come in all shapes and sizes, with the most common ones being the disc triangle auburn cigar. Interestingly, various departments inside the government have focused on researching this phenomena. It turns out it's not just the public that finds these sightings interesting. An initiative that was signed into action in July of 1947 was dedicated to studying reported UFO sightings. The project was converted into Project Grunge in 1949, and then into Project Blue Book in March of 1952. Back in 2007, the Department of Defense began developing a UFO research program tasked with gathering information regarding unidentified flying objects and conducting research as to the observed aircrafts, their origin, and their technological prowess. Another place that was interested in these mysterious objects is that of the Civil Aviation Authority. They're responsible for the regulation of aviation safety in the UK. Turns out, though, that over the years they've received various UFO reports. What's of interest, though, is that these crafts were particularly large and didn't match typical UFO sightings. One report stated the following: "Over the years, the Civil Aviation Authority has received more than a few UFO reports, which is hardly surprising. Back on the 12th of June, 1982, large translucent objects 500 feet long were observed at 41,000 feet. Air Traffic Control requested subject aircraft to investigate this object, which was found to have the form of a double rectangle, surmounted by a globe X-shaped crown by a silver cone. The object was observed by all on board." The Royal Air Force also came forward with some interesting reports. One of interest happened back in the 1950s. Declassified Royal Air Force documents reported that a large number of unidentified flying objects were picked up on radar. It seems to be various reports that state that every so often these objects will appear on radar. The Royal Air Force soon discovered that these objects didn't belong to them or their enemies. Military were observing crafts that were able to travel faster than anything they'd seen before. The objects climbed over 20,000 feet in a matter of seconds. There's no tech they had or were aware of that was able to pull that off. The document stated the following: "A second radar was switched on and detected the object at the same range and height." Perhaps the most interesting thing about this report was the size of the graphs. The military personnel said the crafts were much larger than any conventional aircrafts. The military went on to say the following: "It was noted by the radar operators that the sizes of the echoes were considerably larger than those that would be expected from a normal aircraft. In fact, they considered that the size was nearer that of a ship's echo." All across the world, these large, unidentified flying objects have been observed. It's even more interesting when declassified documents reveal that they've seen the same thing. Usually these objects are debunked as being everyday things, but these documents prove they can even confuse the military. It's not known what these crafts are, and how they're able to travel at such high speeds. So what do you make of these interesting reports, and how do you think they're able to travel the way they do? Stargazers across Europe have been enjoying the large pink supermoon. Although it's called this, astronomers have said there's no difference in color. The best time to see this moon in the UK will be at around 4 a.m. tonight. For many stargazers, this is an event they don't want to miss. These supermoons appear much larger than usual, and have over the years produced some incredible photographs. During these events, the moon is sometimes closer to our planet. which makes it look much larger than it normally is. One NASA scientist said this pink supermoon will be 17,000 miles or 27,000 kilometers closer to us than average. Due to so many cameras being pointed at the moon, we got some really good photos from various locations across Europe. However, some people did manage to capture things they didn't expect. This is what happened to one woman who sent us the following photographs. She said the following: "I was out with my son taking photographs of the moon when I snapped this picture. We were using his telescope that we got him for his birthday, which is a Dobsonian telescope 8-inch. It's great and picks up on the moon really well. After staying out for 30 minutes or so, we decided to head back home. It wasn't until I was looking through the photographs that I noticed something strange. I certainly didn't see this during the time, and I have no idea what to make of it. Whatever it is, it looks like a giant V. I've never seen anything like this before." The woman went on to say that whatever it is, it only appeared in one photograph. On first looking at the object, it does appear to be triangular or V-shaped. This unidentified object, however, could be a variety of things. For example, it could be a satellite, or some other type of space debris that just so happened to be passing by the moon. Astronomers have said the space above our planet is littered with various materials that humans have built. A study in 2013 said there's over 170 million bits of debris outside of our Earth that's smaller than 1 centimeter. There's over 670,000 pieces of debris between 1 and 10 centimeters, and around 29,000 larger pieces were estimated to be in orbit around the Earth. It's important to note that these objects will fall back to Earth sometime in the future. NASA have said there's around 3,000 human-made satellites in working order around the Earth. However, if the debris of old and damaged satellites are taken into account, the number increases dramatically. Astronauts have reported that every so often they'll see fast objects fly by the International Space Station, and that some of these do look strange when zipping past. Glowing orbs and other strange things have been seen outside of the space station. However, NASA have said that most of these can be explained and they turn out to be normal space debris. The question is, would this have been picked up on? I'm interested to hear your guys' opinions on what this object could be. Do you think this is a man-made satellite or something completely different? The National Aeronautics and Space Administration have announced their plans in regards to Mars. The upcoming project, known as the Mars Exploration Mission, will help to pave the way for future colonization efforts on the Red Planet. In a corporate space race, NASA have announced that they have begun to work on a Moon-to-Mars mission that plans on sending humans back to the moon in 2024, and then from there onto the Martian surface with an expected colonization located in 2033. Jim Bridenstine, the current administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, announced on the 15th of July 2019 that the new Artemis project, the project featuring the space agency's return to moon missions, will definitely include plans on human Martian endeavors. Bridenstine elaborated on the plans with the following statement: targeted towards the new Artemis mission during its briefing of the project. "We are working right now, in fact, to put together a comprehensive plan on how we would conduct a Mars mission using the technologies that will be proving at the moon. Mars has been the subject of much discussion over the years. For a long time, researchers said the water isn't present on the Red Planet. The more we've studied Mars, the more we've learned about its various changes over the years. For example, many eons ago, scientists said that Mars would have been uninhabitable. But research has shown us that at one point in time, Mars would have had conditions suitable for life. This is evident in water flows that can be seen on the surface of the Red Planet. One of the more interesting reports to come from this planet, though, is that of living entities. There are people out there that believe there's living creatures and bizarre objects on Mars' surface. They point to past civilizations that left these behind when a massive event occurred. It's important to note that scientists say this never happened, but those that believe there was once a civilization that lived here have provided evidence. One of the most recent photographs that emerged online is this one. Amateur researchers have said that they think it shows a living being on the Red Planet. This photo reminded many of the alleged woman that was captured on Mars a few years back. The photo in question allegedly shows what appears to be a cloaked being standing on a hill. One person said the following: "It appears that this creature is trying to hide." However, the camera was able to snap a photo of it before it left the scene. Others are not so sure though, saying that the photo shows a rock and that people are looking too deep into this. When it comes to these types of photographs, NASA have explained them as being pareidolia. Is claimed that humans use this to enrich the imagination and to see things that are simply not there. According to these researchers, many strange artifacts can be found on the surface of Mars. Perhaps one of the most well-known ones is that of the Mars Rand. It was first picked up on by UFO researchers a few years back, and they suggested the animal was placed on the Martian surface in order to see the effects the planet has on living animals. However, Joy Crisp, who was the Curiosity deputy project scientist of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory at the time, said the following: "Clearly it's a result of wind erosion and mechanical abrasion and breakdown chemical weathering on the rocks. This is why they get these weird shames." So what do you make of these interesting anomalies?